Look down at your phone for a second. If you're like most people, somewhere in your contacts list, in your messages, in your social media follows, there is someone you probably shouldn't be talking to. Maybe it's an ex you haven't quite closed the door on. Maybe it's a coworker you flirt with a little too often. Maybe it's nothing yet, but you both know it could be something. And every single time you tell yourself the same thing. This isn't who I am. This isn't normal. Something is wrong with me. But here's the part nobody wants to admit. Your ancestors were doing this exact same thing 200,000 years ago, and the evidence is written directly into your DNA. Let's start with a number that should not exist. For every one man who reproduced successfully throughout human history, there were roughly two women who did. Read that again. Two women passed their genes forward for every one man who did. Geneticists discovered this by comparing the diversity of mitochondrial DNA, which is passed down only from mothers, with the Y chromosome, which is passed down only from fathers. The math is brutal. Across tens of thousands of years of human history, most men did not reproduce at all, but the men who did reproduce often reproduced with multiple women, and many of those women had children with more than one man over the course of their lives. This is not how monogamy works. This is not even close. If our ancestors had been faithfully pair bonding the way we're told humans are supposed to, the genetic record would look completely different. It doesn't. Something else was happening. Now let's talk about your body, because your body is hiding evidence too. Human testicles are roughly 3 times larger than they should be for a strictly monogamous species. Gorillas live in harems where one male controls all the females, and there's no sperm competition. Their testicles are tiny relative to their body size. Chimpanzees live in groups where females mate with multiple males in quick succession, and the sperm itself competes inside the female's body. Their testicles are massive. Humans sit somewhere in the middle, closer to the chimpanzee side, the biological signature of an animal that evolved expecting sperm competition, expecting that a female might mate with more than one male within a fertile window. Our species did not evolve under conditions of strict fidelity. Our species evolved under conditions where straying was common enough to leave a mark on our anatomy. In 2010, evolutionary psychologist David Buss published research that examined infidelity across 50 different cultures. The pattern was nearly universal. In every single society studied, both men and women engaged in extra-pair sexual relationships. The rates varied, the cultural responses varied, but the behavior itself was found everywhere, from hunter-gatherers in the Amazon to industrialized cities in Europe. Anthropologists call this extra-pair copulation, and it's one of the most consistently documented behaviors in our species. The question isn't whether ancient humans did this, the question is why. Here's where it gets interesting, because the answer is different for men and women, and both answers are uncomfortable. For ancient men, the evolutionary math was simple. Reproduction is cheap for males. A single act could potentially produce offspring with no further investment required. The men who pursued multiple partners passed on more genes than the men who didn't. Over hundreds of thousands of years, this created a population of male descendants who carry a built-in pull toward novelty. It's not a moral failing. It's a statistical inheritance. But for ancient women, the calculation was completely different. Pregnancy lasted 9 months. Breastfeeding lasted years. A woman who slept around carelessly would have suffered enormous cost with no guarantee of return. So why would evolution have selected for female infidelity at all? For a long time, anthropologists assumed it didn't. They assumed women were the faithful sex. The data tells a different story. In 2013, anthropologist Brooke Skelsa of UCLA published a study on the Himba people of Namibia, one of the most carefully documented populations of traditional pastoralists left on Earth. What she found shocked the field. Among the Himba, roughly 70% of women admitted to having children with men other than their husbands at some point in their lives, not occasional flings, documented pregnancies, and critically, the women themselves did not see this as a moral failure. They had a specific cultural concept for it. They distinguished between marriage children and love children. And the love children, the ones conceived outside the marriage, actually showed measurably higher survival rates in some conditions. Why? Because they came with additional resources from the second father, additional social ties, additional protection in a difficult environment. Female infidelity, in certain ecological conditions, was not a bug. It was a survival strategy. Now think about what this means. For most of human history, women were not passively waiting for husbands. They were strategically managing multiple relationships across their reproductive lives, choosing one partner for stability, sometimes another for genetic quality, sometimes another for additional resources during lean years. The romantic ideal of one woman waiting faithfully for one man is, archaeologically speaking, almost an invention. There is one species of primate that practices true, lifelong monogamy. It's not us, it's the gibbon. And gibbons live in trees in small, isolated family units with almost no social complexity at all. That is not the life our ancestors lived. Our ancestors lived in groups of 50 to 150 people. They moved across landscapes together. They shared food, shared shelter, shared the work of raising children. Anthropologists who study modern hunter-gatherer societies have documented something fascinating. In many of these groups, children are not raised by one mother and one father. They are raised by what scientists call alloparents, aunts, uncles, grandmothers, older siblings, neighbors. In some Amazonian cultures, children are believed to have multiple biological fathers. The idea, called partible paternity, is that a baby is built up from the contributions of every man the mother slept with during pregnancy. And rather than causing chaos, this belief actually creates a network of men who all have a stake in that child's survival. Anthropologist Stephen Beckerman documented this among the Bari people of Venezuela in 2002. Children with multiple recognized fathers had significantly higher survival rates than children with just one. The strict biological monogamy we treat as natural was, in many ancestral contexts, actually dangerous. It limited a child's support network. It made families more vulnerable to a single father's death or absence. So when did this change? When did human culture decide that two people and only two people were supposed to bond for life? The answer, like so many strange things about us, traces back to agriculture. Roughly 10,000 years ago, humans started farming. And the moment we started farming, we started owning land, grain, animals, property. And once property entered the equation, paternity suddenly mattered in a way it never had before. A man working a field wanted to know that the children inheriting that field were biologically his. A man with livestock wanted to know who his real heirs were. Marriage, as we now understand it, was not invented to protect love. It was invented to protect inheritance. The oldest known marriage contracts come from ancient Mesopotamia, around 2350 BCE. They are property documents. They list the bride's dowry, the groom's obligations, the penalties for adultery, almost always harsher for women, because a woman's infidelity could introduce another man's child into the inheritance line. A man's infidelity, by the property-based logic of early agriculture, did not threaten the same system. And this is the part that should change how you see your own life. Because for 99% of our existence as a species, we lived in a world without inheritance, without property, without marriage contracts. We lived in a world where attraction was fluid, where families were communal, where straying was common, and where the rigid expectations we now carry simply did not exist. The pull you sometimes feel towards someone you shouldn't, the guilt that follows, the confusion about why your feelings don't match the script you were handed, none of that is a personal flaw. It is the residue of 200,000 years of evolutionary programming colliding with 10,000 years of agricultural rules. And the rules are winning. But the programming is still there. Studies have shown that around 20 to 25% of married men and 10 to 15% of married women in modern Western societies admit to extramarital affairs. Those numbers are probably underestimates. People lie about this even in anonymous surveys. None of this is an argument for cheating. Modern monogamy exists for real reasons: emotional security, trust, stability for children in a world where alloparents are no longer down the path or across the camp. The structure we live in now has genuine benefits, and breaking it carries genuine costs. But understanding where the impulse comes from changes how you think about it. Your ancestors were not saints who suddenly produced a flawed generation. They were complicated humans navigating a landscape of competing pressures, just like you. The difference is they didn't have a single rigid story telling them how love was supposed to work. They had survival, biology, community, and choice. Somewhere inside you is a 200,000-year-old animal that was built for a world of shifting bonds, shared children, and overlapping attractions. And somewhere on top of that animal is 10,000 years of farming, property, and contracts that told it to sit still. Most of us spend our entire lives feeling the tension between those two layers without ever knowing what we're feeling. It's not a personal failure, it's a species-wide echo. Your ancestors cheated because cheating, in the world they lived in, was just another word for staying alive. And whether you act on it or not, that ancient program is still running quietly somewhere in the back of your mind. Most people never realize it's there